Do you read or do you study? Today on the Daily Ish Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Ish Show, a show not just for rental property operators, but for anybody who's looking to be time wealthy. It's good to see you. Thank you for showing up again. My name is Mark Dolfini, your host and your coach. So we're going to be talking today about reading and studying. I know you're thinking, come on, man, it's Friday. Why are you doing this to us, right? Because it's important. That's why. There is a real disconnect that I see going on in the world with people who are successful and people who are not successful, people who are time wealthy and people who have very little control over their calendar, and people who have lots of control over their calendar but are broke as hell. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have control of your calendar, complete control of your calendar, and not really worry about income generation because you have enough to fulfill your vision? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And it reminds me, in terms of this reading or studying, I was actually going back through, as you guys know, I not only read a lot, I also study a lot. So we're going to go in deeper into that here in a second. But this reminds me specifically of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It was written like a zillion years ago, sold like 1 trillion copies. I think it's like number one on New York Times bestselling list forever. I think it was number 3 on Jupiter. I don't know. It went intergalactic, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, this is my old copy. In fact, the pages are yellow. I mean, in fact, this is back. I read this way back before I actually started writing in my books, because I read this so long ago. Actually, I think the first time I listened to it, it was on cassette tape, and that was about the only way I can get through it. But but have my own copy, and so we're going to talk about that. We're actually going to be talking about the 7th habit. So what are the 7 habits if you don't remember, if it's been a long time, or maybe you haven't read it? That's okay. I'm not grading it, right? So we're not being graded for participation today. But so the 7 habits, if you remember, I'm going to try to go by memory here, but first one is to be proactive. I'm not going to explain these because it goes into much deeper than I can explain it right now. But be proactive. Begin with the end in mind, which is always fantastic. And that's something that's really the basis for my teachings in terms of the vision infrastructure process method, right? Vision is to begin with the end in mind. Habit number 3 is to put first things first, what's most important, right? Number 4 is to think win-win. Number 5, seek first to understand and then to be understood. I think that is brilliant. Number 6 is to synergize. That's to seek cooperation. And then number 7 is what today's topic is, and that's to sharpen the saw. So we're going to be talking about sharpening the saw. Now, in the book, you may remember, it covers a lot of different things in terms of sharpening the saw, having a renewal, right? Being part of the renewal cycle, and refreshing, and also continual learning. So having lifelong learning is a component to sharpening the saw. So if you remember, like, thinking about, we're gonna talk about downtime and all that another time, in another session, another show. But just a real quick, conversation on that. Would you, or would anybody in their right mind agree to run a marathon where there's no set finish line? I want you to think about that for a second. Would you agree to run a marathon where there was no set finish line? I don't know about you, but I definitely would not, because that's insanity, right? Yet that's what so many self-employed individuals do. That's what so many entrepreneurs do. And that's exactly what I did for years. I just got on this treadmill, ran as fast as I could for as long as I could until I got exhausted and fell off the treadmill, and the treadmill would just grind my face down, and then I would get back up and do it the next day. That's what it's like when you don't allow yourself downtime. That's also a form of self-sabotage too, but we'll go into that in another time. But anyway, so about reading, one of the most heartbreaking, especially as an author, one of the most heartbreaking things that I learned about the average American is that half of all Americans do not read. It's actually, I think it's 52 or 53%. Half of, we'll just say half of all Americans do not read beyond whatever their highest level of education is. So they don't read anymore. Whether their highest education is whether it's high school, graduate school, whether they got their PhD or whatever, half don't read again. They don't read anything else. And I think that's really sad. And I think some of them might only have to read just because there's continual education requirements for their industry. But beyond that, they don't educate any further than where they're at. So I'm thinking, man, that sucks as an author, right? Number one. But number two, how many people are not advancing, are not getting any better because they're not continuing to educate themselves? And there's lots of people out there doing lots of educational stuff, lots of really cool stuff that needs to be learned, right? And I mean, I think it's like 40,000 books are being published every year, and that's just the ones that are not being self-published. I think there's, I don't remember that exact number, so I don't want to quote that number, but it's a lot. It's a lot of new knowledge that's coming out. Some of it's recycled, some of it's repurposed, some of it is just the same information but taught in a different way. A good example of that was two books that really approached the same concept but in a different way. One was called The One Thing, right? And the other one was The Pumpkin Plan. Two very similar lines of thinking, but approached in a different aspect. And I got a lot out of both books. But the fundamental difference just between reading is I really think the fundamental difference between those who read and those who study, right? I do read a lot, but I would say that not only do I read a lot, if a book takes me down a path that is where I see could better me or better my coaching students or someone else in my life, then I'm going to take that and I'm going to study it. I'm going to take it apart. Now, here's a good example in terms of what I'm talking about. So this book here, the 16 word sales letter. If you do any sort of copywriting, which means like if you do website development, if you do any sort of advertising or anything, if you have not read this book, it is a small book. It's 90 pages. About every copywriter I know has read this book and has done pretty much what I have also done with this. I don't do a lot of copywriting, but I do write a lot of stuff, and I want to make sure that my copy was impactful. So as you can see, along the edge here are all these little tabs that I put on this book. Well, why did I do that? Because there were so many nuggets in this book that I wanted to reference when I go back. So I can go back and study this book without actually having to reread the book. Something else that I did, and I know that I'm just being a complete and total nerd, that you might have noticed the binding right here, I actually taped in a ribbon. So I can go back to a place where I left off and maybe, whatever. But that's not all I do in terms of studying, because that's easy to do. Go back in and, highlight and underline. And lots of people do that, right? Lots of kinesthetic learners, people who have that tactile need to touch, they will do that. But the other thing is, here's another thing that I do. And this is just one of about 3 dozen different little journals that I have that I also have written specifically on the topic of writing copy and different things all these different things that I have tabbed, and this has kind of become my handbook. So when, for example, a student may have a question or maybe something that I need to remember, I can remember, hey, that particular book was about copy. I wrote about that. And when I'm writing it, that's when I truly, truly know it. So I think this is really where now let me back up for just a second. This also speaks to where it sits within one of my 6 basic human needs of my need for growth, right? We all have 6 basic human needs. This is something from Tony Robbins. We all have a need for significance. We all have a need for certainty, variety, love, and connection, right? Those are the first 4. And then the higher needs are the needs of the spirit, which would be growth and contribution, right? I said those kind of fast. So again, there's significance, certainty, variety, love, and connection, and then growth and contribution. So those are the 6 human needs. So my needs, I have a very high need for growth, right? That's a really, really important thing for me. And I also have a high need for contribution. So when I'm growing, it is almost always so I can contribute and give it to someone else. It's like, hey man, did you know, let me share this with you, because I love to grow, and I love to see other people grow. Those are two big things for me. So, but also I get a lot of variety. I get a lot of I get a lot of significance. I get a lot of certainty when I read. In out of my study. So for me, that's why I do what I do, because I have my probably top 1 and 2 needs. They go in, and there's a syntax to them. There's an order to them generally. My top needs are growth and contribution. Those are two very big needs for me. But so that's why I do what I do. That's why I do it that way. For you, if you're watching this video, you might be thinking that is way too much for me. Like, I'm okay to sit and watch a video, but I don't really know that I'm going to take notes on it. I don't really know that I'm going to go any deeper in the study. If, you know, for example, if they referenced a book in the video, are you going to go ahead and put that on your wish list in your Amazon, which I have to trim that down because I have a problem, right? But anytime I reference a book in another book, I underline that, I tab it, and make sure that I write it on my list of guilt if it is something that I'm going to want to get down the road. Or I'll just go ahead and put it in my wish list, or in my Amazon. So these are the sorts of things that I would suggest if you really are truly interested in going, you know, reading versus studying. Now, do I read books on occasion that I'm one and done? Of course. It's like, hey, not a bad book, got a couple topics here or there, but I'm one and done, right? Are there other books that absolutely just kind of blow it out of the water for me? Yes, absolutely. There's other things that are just like that. So what I would suggest for you is decide, you know, where do you want to grow? If that's something you really are really interested in. And reading does not have to be a sucky, horrible thing. If you just took 15 minutes out of every day, just 15 minutes, and read just for 15 minutes, it's going to be just a couple of pages, but you're going to be ahead of most everybody else that is not reading. And you can read about anything. My suggestion would be something that's going to be not the newspaper, something that's going to be about you growing, something about you growing in a direction that, you know, maybe it's just going to help you grow in a direction that you never really even thought you'd be interested in. So something to keep open in your mind. But anyway, that's all I have. Kathleen, Paul, yeah, you look at the pictures. I get that. All right. Well, that's all I have for today, everybody. For those fathers out there, I hope you have a happy Father's Day weekend. And I know we're going to try to go kayaking. Hopefully the weather will cooperate, but if it doesn't, I don't know. It's going to be a good weekend regardless. All right, everybody, please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. Most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome weekend. I'll see you guys next time.